Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I'm sitting in the backyard of my Portland, Oregon permaculture garden, and we are in zone 8B here. Behind me, you can see my chicken coop. Right in front of that is a bunch of purple tree collards. Over here is one of my June berries in bloom, a comfrey down here, and I have some sea buckthorn back here behind me. So I'm sitting in my garden enjoying the few moments of not rain that we're having, and I wanted to talk today about kind of a philosophical area of permaculture and something that I think is really applicable in many areas of our life and is highly pertinent to any of these kind of sustainability movements or ecological environmental movements, not just permaculture. There's many ways that this subject is applicable to folks who are interested in homesteading, natural living, sustainable agriculture, and kind of a wanting to reconnect with the earth and having more of a conscientious way of living. So today let's talk about the concept of good, better, best, and tying in with that concept the notion of harm reduction, the practice of harm reduction. So why am I bringing this up today? Why is it important to learn about this concept, good, better, best? Well, what I'm seeing in a lot of groups, and I know I'm not unique to this, in fact, I've had conversations with multiple friends this week out of my own frustration, I'm seeing this kind of polarization where you can glom on to an appealing subject, an appealing way of living, be it, plant-only natives. I made a video about this recently. Be it no plastic living. Be it, doing off-grid living. Be it permaculture practice. Where you can embrace the really good things about those kinds of movements and notions and just take them all the way to their extreme, forming this kind of pedantic, really rigid way of thinking about approaching those subjects. I think that it's pretty common because we're looking for some measure of control, right? When life feels really out of control for us, we're living through a pandemic that is not over, no matter what people want to pretend. We are living in really difficult times in terms of global politics and in terms of economics, in terms of global political instability, in terms of our food chain and supply chain issues. All of those things feel really stressful, and for us as individuals, it can feel really, really out of control. We can also be looking at the major issues of giant microplastic pollution. We can be looking at systemic depletion and degradation of wild spaces, of exploitation of natural resources, of the loss of wild places and the loss of diversity of wildlife itself. And that can feel really frightening, and it can feel really out of control when we as individuals don't have ways to manifest systemic change to heal these huge sweeping issues that are really pressing. We're looking at a climate change future, and we're wondering what can we as individuals do? So we look at these small things that we can have some measure of control over, like eat all organic, only buy from local farmers, don't use any plastic, use a composting toilet, only use solar, unplug from all of the petroleum products and use a human-powered dryer. Go car free and only bike everywhere and ride public transport. Those are all really good things in and of themselves, but when we feel that those are the only ways that we can access being part of the solution, I think it can be really tempting in a period of time that feels really fraught and really difficult, and in a world where these big global problems feel really out of control for us, to take these kind of good niche issues, these good ways of embracing sustainability and wanting to do the right thing, and we can push them to an extreme that becomes really harmful. So let's take an example from my own life. I really like to eat seasonally. I really like to shift and mold my diet to what is available out of my own garden and available in my local food economy in a given season. I think that's a really good approach to eating a really diverse and nutritious and sustainable diet. But if I take that to a level where it's highly legalistic and it is a moral failing to not eat seasonally and locally, I've somehow twisted a good by pushing it all the way to its limit and made it a judgment against people who don't eat that way, or a judgment against myself when I mess up and eat non-locally and non-seasonally. I think this is something that we can be in danger of doing in all sorts of ways when we are striving for sustainability. So I definitely see it in permaculture groups a lot, where like if you weren't doing permaculture perfectly, I have a video on this as well, then you somehow can't access permaculture or shouldn't be allowed to do it, or you're open to judgment. I see it in the plant-only natives kind of group, where if you are not planting 100% natives, and not just like native species, but also like not cultivars of native species, just straight natives, then you are like a terrible person, and you as an individual backyard gardener are like destroying the planet. I've seen it with folks who want to go plastic free, and it becomes almost like a religious fervor to want to go plastic free, right? So when our desire to do good gets pushed to an extreme and we begin to think really in binary terms. So if I go in like 100% fully committed, doing it the most zealous way possible, or I'm an utter failure, or if other people have to do it exactly in the most extreme way possible, or they are destroying the planet and a complete failure, I have completely missed the boat. I have lost the plot entirely. And I think that is something that those of us who have a really earnest desire, we have an earnest yearning to want to do right by the planet and by our neighbors, we can fall into that way of thinking. It can be really, really easy to say everything feels out of control right now, and this is the one way I can have control, and I want to have more and more and more and more and more control. And so I'm just going to take this pet issue that I have, and I'm going to just push it as far as it will go. The concept of good, better, best doesn't think in this really binary, kind of polarizing way of thinking. It's much more like perhaps there is the best way to do things, but we're not going to condemn folks who cannot access things at the most extreme level, even if the most extreme is the best. We're going to say, yes, it's good to want to eat seasonally. It's good to want to keep your supply chain, your food sourced locally whenever you can. That's great. Do it in a way that's affordable for you and accessible for you. Even better, think about growing more of your own food that you can then enjoy seasonally and keep your supply chain limited to right out your back door. Think about another better would be really focus on tapping into more culinary skills so you can better utilize those things that are in season a certain period of the year. Best would be, don't eat imported, giant carbon footprint, factory farmed food. Or even better than that, best would be work for policy change that completely dismantles an unsustainable food system that exploits workers and the planet, and instead support lawmakers, vote for lawmakers, push for policy changes that remake our food system into something that actually is sustainable. So another way to think about good, better, best would be something like getting rid of your lawn, which is a big one. Everybody knows on this channel I hate grass and I hate my lawn, and I got rid of all of it a long time ago. But that doesn't mean that if everybody else doesn't get rid of their lawn, it is a moral failing and they're terrible people. Instead, we would think about good would be, can you devote part of your yard to habitat for wildlife? Can you devote part of your yard to growing more flowering plants and more food to feed your family? Better would be something like maybe consider getting rid of your lawn altogether and utilizing lawns in public spaces that are shared and use fewer resources, like at parks. Get rid of your lawn and put in naturescaping, xeriscaping, wildlife meadows, permaculture gardens. So best would be something like thinking about how we can focus on why our culture is so obsessed with the concept of a lawn, and what can we do to shift cultural change? What can we do to make big changes in the way we view accessing the land that we own, the way we access common shared spaces, and the way we think about the garden ecosystem? What can we do to support policy change and cultural change, consumer change that kind of dismantles the whole notion of a completely unsustainable lawn to begin with? Instead of just like crapping all over people that decide that they need a lawn for their dogs or their kids, or they like the way it looks, maybe we could introduce them to the good, better, best setup, where it's not get rid of all of your lawn or just like give up. It's not get rid of all of your lawn or you're a bad person. It's like are there ways you could think about giving up part of your lawn just a little bit, like put in a little flower border, start there. Put in a couple of raised beds, start there. So when we talk about good, better, best, we're talking about incremental ways that you can step into approaching sustainability in a way that people don't feel judged and condemned, and in a way that puts things on a spectrum of accessibility for other people, and also helps free us from judgment of that like really binary polarized thinking, right? Another way to think about this is harm reduction. So encouraging people to do the best they can within a really broken system. So I spoke about this earlier. We may feel like we are powerless to face climate change head on, to fix the problem of microplastic pollution, to fight corporations that exploit us and exploit our shared planet for profit. That can feel really out of control for us. And so I think that we, instead of thinking about like, okay, I have to get really zealous about my one favorite area, like permaculture, and I have to preach this message that everybody has to do permaculture like I do it to an extreme, or they're failing. Instead, look at the reality that like we as individuals can have a substantial impact. I mean, my garden has a substantial impact on the quality of my life, the life of people in my household, and an impact on my community and an impact on wildlife. But it's not nearly the same as the impact of making big changes, big systemic changes that are done on a much larger scale, right, than the individual level. And so I think that when we look at harm reduction, we're looking at what can we as individuals do in a broken system to reduce the harm that is done. We aren't perfect. We aren't going to be able to single-handedly bring about a sustainable way of living. Our small contributions are a way of reducing harm, are a way of contributing positively to a system that is actively harming us and the planet. So I think when we look at good, better, best, we're looking at communicating to other people that you can step into the process of sustainability wherever you're at. And even if you do just a little bit, that's still good. That's still better than nothing. If you do a little bit more, that's even better. And so it removes from us this temptation to want to judge people if they do it less than we do. It removes the temptation to judge ourselves if we do it less than our ideals, which is something I really struggle with. And it frees us up to take joy in doing things at the level of good or better, right? Because what we're doing is meaningful and it does matter. And when you combine it with harm reduction, where you're saying, I know that the system is really broken, that can feel really overwhelming at times. I'm going to focus on the things that I can do that help people around me and help the planet at the level that I can step into those things, and I'm going to try and reduce harm. I can't necessarily fix an entire broken system, but I can work on reducing the harm that is caused to other people and to the planet as best I can, and that can feel successful. I don't have to feel so crazy out of control because I can't fix the whole thing. I change my expectations of myself and I change my expectations of the system. It's not up to me to through the process of reducing my plastic or recycling everything to end microplastic pollution. It's not up to me to end our reliance on petroleum products. But it's up to me to contribute my voice to calling for a changed system and a changed way of living, and at the same time making sure that my daily rituals and my daily way of living matches my values. So as you're looking at permaculture, if you're tempted to get pushed really far out of like an excitement or out of like an anxiety, either one, to get pushed toward like a really zealous way of looking at it, a way of approaching permaculture, and a way of judging others or judging yourself if you don't live up to like a really high ideal, I would encourage you to approach the good, better, best method and to approach the harm reduction method and think about what are ways that I myself can step into sustainable living that are small, but also really matter to me and really matter to my immediate sphere. What are ways that I can start with just getting my toe in the door? What are ways that I can encourage my neighbors and folks in my community, folks on social media, to step into sustainability right where they're at, to just take one initial step, because that's a good thing. And then as they get comfortable with the good, maybe they can start to do a little bit more of the better and kind of branch out and grow. Instead of launching in with like, oh my gosh, the planet is in a horrible state and climate change is happening and we're destroying all of this wild habitat. We have got to immediately completely upend the way we individuals are living and make these broad sweeping changes on our own, even though we may have limited time and resources and energy. And if we don't, we're bad people. Nah, man, like plant some natives if you enjoy natives, but you don't have to rip out your whole garden and grow only native plants. It's good to engage with growing some natives. It's better to maybe think about what is my interaction as an individual? What is my interaction with the wildlife in my community? And how can I enhance that relationship, right? I won't say that best is growing all natives. I'm not going to say that. But I will say that best is pushing for conservation of wild spaces. It's pushing for support of research, of our native pollinators, of our native ecosystems, and it is seeking to restore wild places that have been depleted. All of those are ways that we can kind of plug in good, better, best, right? And that we can feel successful at any level that we are able to plug in at, and that there is no condemnation. Good is still good. If you are plugging in at the good level, you are doing good. So those are my thoughts. If you're doing permaculture, if you are interested in any of those topics of like ecological regeneration and sustainable living, I would really encourage you to think about the spectrum of good, better, best, to really resist the temptation to push all the way to an extreme end and to engage in judgment of yourself and others when you don't follow through or they don't follow through on that really, really steep end of the curve. Think about the fact that you are owed grace. We are all trying to function in a really broken system, and we are trying to do the best that we can to make a positive impact for ourselves and for others. So please extend grace to yourself and extend grace to other people when they have a different way of looking at it than you. Extend grace to other people when they don't see eye to eye with you and don't believe that going, whole hog into something as much as you do is right for them right now where they're at. Understand that people have to function and do better within the context of their real lives and their energy level and their level of understanding. So let's encourage everybody to do good. Let's encourage everybody to reduce harm. And let's just be encouragers in general. Please check out my Patreon down below. Supporting me through Patreon helps me continue to be able to make videos on a regular basis, sometimes 6 or 7 days a week. When you all sponsor me through Patreon, it means that I can continue to do this work. Your sponsorship is really, really impactful for me and my family. It makes all the difference. So thank you for those of you who do sponsor me. And I hope you will consider checking out my Patreon down below. Thanks.